Welcome to the Mini Book Podcast, African American Books Edition. Today we are looking at Slaves in the Family by Edward Ball. We thank you for listening, and please consider subscribing for future content. After hearing this podcast, we would encourage you to go out and purchase this book and support the author.
State clearly, wait, no. The voices you hear come from AI, but the content comes straight from the book, and we feel that this is a great way to learn about African American history.
So to start things off today, I really want you to ask yourself a question, just a truly challenging question.
Yeah, it's a heavy one to sit with.
How would you react if you discovered your own family was responsible for enslaving over 4,000 human beings?
Across 6 generations.
Right across 6 generations.
Yeah.
I mean, would you do what most people throughout history have done and simply bury the past? Or would you actually try to track down their 100,000 living descendants today just to look them in the eye?
It's a staggering hypothetical for most of us, but for the author Edward Ball, it was his literal reality. Today we're exploring his unprecedented journey to uncover his prominent South Carolina family's darkest secrets.
And his mission in this book is to really shatter that pervasive myth of the gentle master that has kind of lingered in parts of the South for centuries.
Exactly. To shatter that myth and to actually confront the descendants of the people his own ancestors enslaved.
Which is just, it's an incredible undertaking. But imagine unlocking a vault, right, and finding 10,000 pages of meticulous, horrifying receipts.
And we are not talking about standard business ledgers or grocery bills here.
No, you're finding human lives cataloged like farm equipment.
It's chilling. And to understand it, you have to picture the sheer scale of the Ball family dynasty. Between 1698 and 1865, they operated 25 different plantations.
25.
Yeah, 25 of them right along the Cooper River in South Carolina.
And the economic engine behind that massive empire was driven entirely by this crop known as Carolina gold.
Right, and let's break that down for a second, because Carolina gold wasn't, actual gold mine from the earth.
No, it sounds like a metal, but it's not.
It was a highly lucrative premium strain of rice. It thrived in the coastal swamps of that region. And this single crop built the family's massive fortune completely on the backs of forced labor.
Because the environment was just notoriously brutal. Sweltering heat, deep mud, malaria-infested waters.
But the global demand for this specific rice made the profits absolutely astronomical.
Which leads to the records. The fact that the Ball family kept exhaustive records that somehow survived the Civil War.
It's so rare.
It is. They tracked exactly how many yards of cloth or pairs of shoes were handed out to people. They logged the exact dates babies were born into slavery.
Treating them instantly as inventory.
Exactly as inventory. They even recorded tax appraisals that calculated the exact monetary value of human beings at different stages of their lives.
And those surviving records are what makes Ball's research so undeniably powerful. Because, many plantation families either saw their records burned during the war or they intentionally destroyed them.
To avoid scrutiny.
Right, or just to erase the past completely. But because these 10,000 pages survived intact, they provide this unbreakable paper trail of human exploitation.
And they really highlight how volatile this system was, especially during times of conflict. So there's this outrageous story about one of his ancestors known as Wamball Elias Ball.
Oh yeah, Wamball Elias.
So during the American Revolution, Wamball Elias chose the wrong side. He became a Tory, meaning he stayed loyal to the British.
Right, while the rebels fought for independence.
Exactly. So when it became clear the British were going to lose, he didn't just quietly surrender. He literally dragged 50 enslaved people out of their dwellings and hid them in the woods.
Just unbelievable.
He hid them to prevent the Americans from confiscating what he considered his property. He actively recaptured runaways, sold them off to cash out his assets, and then fled to England.
It just perfectly illustrates how enslaved people were viewed strictly as liquid capital. The political winds shifted, and he just liquidated his human property into currency.
But what happens when you decide to expose your own family's deepest, darkest secrets centuries later?
Well, you become what Edward Ball calls the radioactive relative.
The radioactive relative, yeah. The immense pushback he faced from his own relatives was just immediate.
Because in the South, that plantation heritage is often veiled in this romantic glow. He found that white descendants really cling to 2 specific myths.
The first one being we were gentle masters.
Right. The idea that our family treated people well, unlike those other plantations. And the second myth is that our men didn't sleep with the enslaved women.
And Edward's research just blows both of those myths entirely apart.
Completely. And to understand how absolute the power dynamic was that allowed this abuse, you really have to look at a historical legal doctrine called coverture.
Coverture, right. Let's explain what that meant for the people living back then.
So when a woman married into the Ball family, coverture meant her independent legal identity vanished.
It was gone.
All her property, which tragically included any enslaved people she brought as a dowry, transferred entirely to her husband.
It was this strictly patriarchal system designed to keep wealth, land, and human property strictly controlled by the men.
The men held absolute, legally protected power over every single person on the estate.
Which brings us to the modern-day reaction from his family. Many of his cousins weren't just worried about public shame or media vilification.
No, they were terrified about the money.
Yes, they were terrified that his book would lead to massive lawsuits for financial reparations. They thought exposing the truth would literally bankrupt them.
So that's the family's reaction. But how do you actually track down families whose histories were intentionally erased?
And more importantly, what happens when you finally knock on their door?
Right, because the math of the descendants is just staggering. At the end of the Civil War, there were roughly 842 people freed from the Ball plantations.
And from those 842 people Edward calculated, there are nearly 100,000 living descendants today. 100,000. It's massive. And he actively sought them out. There's this jaw-dropping story of a 10-year-old girl named Priscilla.
Oh, Priscilla's story is incredible.
The family records show that in 1756, she was bought from a slave prison on Bunce Island in Sierra Leone.
Just 10 years old.
Brought across the ocean to the Cumming Tea Plantation. And over 240 years later, Edward uses those exact family records to trace her bloodline.
Generation by generation.
Yes, until he finds her direct descendant today. A man named Thomas Martin. Edward literally goes to his house, sits in his living room, and hands this man his own family tree,
Can you imagine?
tracing his roots all the way back to that 10-year-old girl in West Africa.
The psychological weight of that moment is profound. Because when he started reaching out, the black families he contacted were understandably stunned.
Stunned, suspicious, sometimes outright angry.
Briefly so. I mean, why is the descendant of the white master suddenly showing up in their living rooms in Harlem or Philadelphia?
It completely upends their lives. But through these conversations, he gathered oral histories that matched his written records perfectly.
And those oral histories reveal realities of plantation life that standard history textbooks gloss right over.
Prepare yourself for a chilling reality here, because this detail proves exactly why the gentle master myth is a complete lie.
Yeah, the midnight burials.
Edward spoke to an elderly descendant named Emily Frere, and she shared a history passed down from her grandmother. Enslaved people were forced to bury their dead at night.
By torchlight.
By torchlight. Because the masters refused to give them any time off during the day to mourn.
The daytime was strictly for working the fields.
Harvesting the Carolina gold. Denying a grieving family the daylight to properly bury their dead.
It's a cruelty that really stands as a testament against any romanticized version of that era.
And these conversations brought up another uncomfortable truth. It directly challenges the myth that white men didn't sleep with enslaved women.
Right during his research, Edwina Harleston Whitlock introduced him to a term used in the black community. The term was step-asides.
Step-asides. It's such a devastating term when you break down what it means.
It really is. Step-asides was used to describe children born to white plantation masters and enslaved women.
The white fathers would exert their power, father these children, and then simply step aside.
They refused to acknowledge their own children legally or socially, leaving this incredibly painful legacy of shared bloodlines.
So you have people walking around today who share common ancestors, but are divided by this massive historical chasm of inequality.
Which leads to some truly bizarre echoes of the past in the modern day.
Oh, you absolutely won't believe how some modern-day descendants of slave owners choose to spend their Thursday evenings in Charleston.
It is unbelievable. There is an exclusive all-white club called the Society for the Preservation of Spirituals.
And it's made up entirely of descendants of plantation owners.
Right. They dress up in antebellum clothing. The men wear tailcoats. The women wear these giant satin hoop skirts.
And they perform the religious songs and work spirituals of the very people their ancestors enslaved.
While singing in Gula.
Yes, Gula. We need to explain Gula for the listener because it's fascinating.
Gula is the unique Black English dialect of the coastal South Carolina and Georgia Sea Islands.
It's this beautiful, complex language formed by mixing English vocabulary with West African grammar.
And you have this white choir in hoop skirts fiercely debating the exact Gullah pronunciation to use.
It's just this bizarre white nostalgia. And Edward juxtaposes this with the actual struggles of the black descendants.
Yeah, the contrast is stark. While one group is performing history, the other group is dealing with the consequences of it.
Like the Martin family, the direct descendants who faced military tanks during civil rights protests in Orangeburg.
Or those who migrated north to places like New York or Philadelphia just to escape the crushing poverty of the sharecropping system.
Which was basically the system that just replaced slavery right after the war.
Exactly.
So it leaves you with this really powerful, provocative thought to mull over. We often think of history as something dead and buried in the past.
But what if it is literally walking beside you?
Edward realizes that living generations are not responsible for the crimes of their ancestors. Nobody alive today did those things.
Right, but the question he asks is so important. Are we accountable?
Are we accountable for the advantages and the deeply unequal society we inherited from them?
It's a question that completely shifts how you view the world around you today.
It really does. Well, we want to end today by asking you to please subscribe to the podcast. Tell others about this podcast so we can keep bringing you these discussions.
And please suggest in the comments which books you would like to hear in future episodes.
Yes, let us know in the comments. We thank you so much warmly for subscribing and listening. Have a great day.